And greetings. Is this on? Can you hear me now? I think we are live. Welcome. Thanks for joining us for another LinkedIn Live and kind of another one in our Support for Job Seekers series. And with this LinkedIn Live, we're doing something a little bit different. We are bringing in my friend Michael Dobbs. And wait, is there a Michael Dobbs that's even more famous than you? I don't know.
Couldn't be.
Suddenly when I said that, I'm like,
there is an author.
Okay.
He doesn't have these childish good looks. So.
Oh, got it. So Michael's an interesting guy. He's been, out in the work world for well over 35 years. I know it's hard to tell. You'd look at him and you'd think, no, it couldn't possibly be. But he's worked in consumer product goods. He's worked in retail, consulting. My understanding is these days he works with IBM and Salesforce and stuff like that. So very much on the tech side these days. He's had a bunch of really interesting roles. He's been VP of Marketing, VP of Merchandising, Chief Marketing Officer. Lots of really snazzy sounding, impressive sounding titles Michael's held. And he's been involved in hiring on both sides. He's hired lots of people. He's done lots of job searches. And he's also, I'm sure, had to let some people go. And he shared with me that he's been let go in the past, too. And he headed up a job seeker support group for a few years. So I'm super excited. Michael, welcome. How are you doing this evening?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm really happy to be here with you. And so, gosh, where to start? Actually, your first job. What was it? How'd you get it?
So my first job was actually coming out of work that I did in my junior to senior year of college, where I went, believe it or not, of all places, to Germany and took an internship with Colgate-Palmolive. And that internship kind of developed into a job offer, which I luckily got in the January of my senior year. So it made the second half of my senior year a lot of fun. So I worked for Colgate for probably 13 or 14 years.
Wow. So that's a long first gig. And what was that like career arc like? Like, how'd you come in and where were you when you left?
So what was great about that job was it gave me an opportunity to learn to do and to lead and to think strategically. I came in at a relatively low level. I was an expatriate for most of my time there, and they were really looking for people to kind of take a leadership role, drive the operations of the organization and so forth. And so despite the fact that I was at a young age, I was able to do a lot, learn a lot, and that helped me. That helped me grow. You mentioned that I've been on both sides of this hiring journey. So I left Colgate because the chief operating officer and I didn't see eye to eye on some things, and I actually got let go. And that was especially tough because I was coming back from Russia at the time. I'd been running marketing for Colgate in Russia. And so I didn't have a network. And I hope one of the things we talk about is the importance of a network and the importance of networking. But, with that said, coming back to the States, not having a network to support me as I started my job search was a real difficulty.
So, yeah, I love that transition. One of the things we have talked about a lot in this series is the importance of a network and how to build your network. What are your thoughts? What's your experience? What's your advice?
So, look, it is what it is, guys. Networking stinks. Nobody likes it. It's a hard job. And the reason it's a hard job is that you've got to just kind of keep those lines of communication open. You're always kind of selling, and you always kind of feel like you're going out there with your hands open. And that's a mistake, because actually networking can be a two-way street where you're learning things from the people you're talking to and they're learning things from you as well. But I think it's human nature not to like it. And I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people as I've tried to coach people and mentor people about the importance of networking, not just when you're in a job search, but also when you're not in a job search, because it's the network that you create and it's the network that you maintain that is really one of the few pieces of human capital that you have. If you think a title means anything, it really doesn't. It comes back to the people that you know, the people that will vouch for you, the people that will go out of their way to help you. And you create that by staying in touch with people. Networking doesn't mean, calling someone and asking for a job. As a matter of fact, that's the very last thing you should do if you're networking. When I call my friend Bill and we talk about the fact that I just had a fantastic weekend with my daughter, that's networking, right? It's creating, it's maintaining the network. I don't need to use every phone call for kind of that purpose. But I started on this, and Chris, pull me back in a second, but I started on this saying it's not about asking for a job. And I think that's one of the most important points that I've learned and that I've tried to teach to people. The very last thing you ever do when you're networking is you ask for a job, because you never want to put the person on the other side of the phone, or in this case, the video chat, the downside of having to say no, right? So if you're talking to me and I see that you're the perfect fit, I'm going to come up with that myself. I'm going to be excited that I can help you, right? I've actually just succeeded. But if you ask me, do you have a job? And I have to say no, it kind of ends the conversation and it ends it on a sour note. And so what you do instead is you talk to the person. You think in advance of the 1, 2, 3 questions you want to ask. You ask those questions, you get their advice. And the advice can be career related. It can be, I've been running into these brick walls as I've been trying to meet with people, network with people. Do you have any advice on how I can get around those walls? So you can get right up to it. Just don't actually ask for a role. And what I always say to people, and this was one of the most important things I learned, was at the end of every call, and make sure the calls aren't more than 5 minutes long, because, at some point, if you have a half-hour phone call with people, they might not take your next call, right? Because everyone's busy. So at the end of the call, talk to them about, I'm really trying to understand more about this topic, whatever it is. Do you have 2 or 3 people that I could reach out to and talk to them about it? And so every call becomes a future opportunity for more calls. And when you then follow up, you're like, well, hey, hey, Joe, I was talking to Chris Sims the other day, and I'm really curious to learn about this topic. And he said you're one of the brightest people he knows on it. Would you have 5 minutes just to talk to me? And people will almost always say yes, right? And I'm sure you all have heard this, because it's really 101 stuff. But to answer your question in a shorter way, Chris, I think people shy away from networking because it's a lot easier to write a lot of emails. It's a lot easier to go to LinkedIn and submit a lot of resumes. It's a lot easier to do all of those other things. It's a lot easier, if you're at the right level, to talk to headhunters. But at the end of the day, the majority of jobs are gotten today because of networking. And so if you are in a job search, I would almost say, as a rule of thumb, 60 to 70% of your time should go into networking. And the rest of it you can put into those easier, low touch things, which percentage-wise have a lower chance of success, like adding your resume to the 1,000 other resumes of people that are interested in a job on LinkedIn.
So I had this little aha as you were saying all of that, which was, you were describing that, just when you're talking to your friend, that's networking, right? That's working on your network. I went, wait a minute. I think we're networking right now. And I think the cool thing about it is a lot of networking is actually just having mutually beneficial conversations and interactions, right? So I don't look for jobs, but we're always looking for clients and work as a company. And I've come to believe that the best way to sell like Agile Learning Labs and our services is just to be out there and provide a lot of value, right? So if I go to a meetup and give a talk or just have a little conversation with somebody and turn them on to a couple of resources, like, oh, they got actual value from me in that little exchange. And who knows, 6 months, a year, 5 years later, maybe they need Scrum training. Maybe they're the leader of an organization that wants to, get some coaching and support for a whole bunch of teams. And they're like, I remember that guy.
Yeah.
And
I would say two things to that, though. I would say, first of all, really important to keep the network alive. If you don't touch someone in, let's say, 3 to 6 months, you will fall out of their face of awareness. So what I used to do, I created an Excel file. I'm sure there are better, more technically advanced ways of doing this, in which I would record every conversation I was having, what the key points were, and when I wanted to follow up. And then I would use that as kind of a to-do tickler to say, I'm going to reach out to that person, so that it didn't end up being 3 years and he may or may not remember me because he's had other conversations since. The other thing that I was really good at is I found my memory is getting kind of poor. So one of my favorite stories was at one point I decided to get very direct with a few companies. I targeted 5, 6 companies, wrote some letters to their top executives, and outlined why I thought it was important for them to talk to me and that that we should speak, right? And so that's all great. And, I'm doing something at home and my mind was somewhere else. And I get this phone call. Hello? Yes, Michael, this is Howard Schultz. I wanted to talk to you about the letter you wrote me. Chris, I had no idea who Howard Schultz was. If you'll excuse my Greek, the friggin' CEO of Starbucks is calling me back off of a cold call letter, and I stumbled, right? And it didn't go well. So kudos for sending that letter, but make sure you're able then, with little help, to remember why you sent it, or to remember when the person reaches back to you, who the heck Howard Schultz is, right?
That's fantastic.
It wasn't that day. I can tell you, it wasn't that day.
No, you didn't try to fake it. It wasn't like, oh, Howard, I was hoping you would call.
No, I almost wish I had done that. I said, Howard, I hate to admit this to you, but I've sent out a lot of letters to a lot of people, and I can't place the name.
Oh,
and I was, that's me. I mean, me. I'm direct, and like I say, it didn't go well. So,
oh my goodness. So one of the things you shared with me is that you spent several years leading kind of like a community group, job seeker kind of support group, if you will. I'm curious about that story. Like, how did you get interested in that? And, what were some of the things you learned through helping others find gigs?
So I've had the pleasure of being out of work probably 3 times in my career, 2 times approaching a year. And in that, I've gone to a number of these kind of job seeker groups, kind of support groups, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And I have felt strengthened by them, right? So there's a number of things that you tend to do in these groups. One is you make contact with other people. You have a group of other people that you're accountable to for the work that you've done in the past week or 2 since you've been together. You get ideas from people on all of this, and it has helped me a lot when I've been out of work. And so at one point, it occurred to me that one thing I could do to give back was to create such a group. And so the group was affiliated with the church that I was going to at the time. And I went to the ministry and I said, this is what I want to do. And they supported me. And we ended up, it would change from week to week, but we ended up needing to get larger and larger rooms because there was just a need for it. And, I feel like it was good. I feel like we did a lot of good for each other in the group. I was actually out of work during a part of that time. And yeah, so I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then at one point my job changed. So I'm with IBM, as you mentioned before, and I ended up in an international role where I was barely ever at home, and so I ended up having to pass the group off to someone else at the time. But yeah, that was how it started, and I think it was a good thing. I think we did a lot of good.
So I'm curious. I'm jumping around here a little bit, but um, so in your various kind of high-powered roles, I'm imagining you were involved in hiring. Um, Probably looked at a lot of resumes. What was it that caught your eye? Right? What was it that would make you like look at a resume and go, "Oh, this might be worth a phone call"?
So let me just say times have changed, right? So back in my day, there was no such thing as AI. There was no such thing as kind of scanning a resume and getting half of the work done by a computer for you. In the days that I was doing kind of that large scale hiring that you were just mentioning, you had some people in HR that had their checklist, and things would eventually get filtered to you. So let me first answer the question, and let me say how things have changed since then, right? So um, first of all, it needs to speak to the role. If I'm hiring for a specific role, and I see a great resume that's not fitting the role, at very best, I'll put it on the side in case I ever need it again, but then I won't find it when I do, so it won't help anyone, right? If you are looking to fill a certain role, your resume needs to say that you're going to fill that role. You're also going to be up against, realistically speaking, by the time you get to the hiring manager, at least 20 resumes
Mm-hmm.
that are all in the ballpark. And so what you need to do is get past the people that are checking off your resume in front of the relevant hiring manager, but then you also need to stand out in some way. And I think that's often, it's important to use a resume for that, and it's important to use a cover letter for that. And with that said, what I would also tell you is a resume and a cover, no job has ever been won because of a great resume, right? The resume has one role, and that's getting you the interview. And so what you need to do in the resume is be good enough to get that first interview, and then you need to nail that interview. And I would say there are a couple ways, or a couple important things to do that. The first is people hire people they want to work with. And so you need to create a relationship pretty quickly, because people make up their minds way too quickly in the real world. So you need, in the first 5 minutes, to create a relationship. And you might be nervous, and that's fine, but you need to work around that and just create a conversation with the person. And don't talk about your cute little puppy, but figure out something to talk about that is relevant. And obviously, think about this ahead of time. Think about, if you have an interview with, name a company, with Home Depot, with Kroger, right? Think about your last few times that you went to Kroger. Think about the relationship that you have with their brand. Think about the relationship you have with the competitive brands. Figure out what the story can be that you can create. And if you can tie that back to the value that you can add to them, that's even better, right? So when you're prepping for interviewing in general, I think one of the most useful things to do is to think about your stories. You can create in your mind, I'm just going to pick a number out of a hat. If you're in the beginning of the process, let's say you create 10 stories. These are going to be the 10 stories that I have. This story talks to this thing, right? I was able to drive these KPIs. I was able to drive leadership. I was able to, whatever it is. And then when Chris Sims asks me a specific question, I will artfully turn that response into one of my stories, which I kind of have prepped and I can talk to. I'm not going to talk to them as a static dummy. I'm not going to be like, when I was whatever. You need to prep in front of a mirror. You need to be able to talk about these things. And so you create these, what I'm going to call kind of more generic stories, which are stories that can help you in every interview. And then what I would do, if you really want a job, is on top of that, before you go in to talk to Kroger, if those are the people you're talking to, think about what your stories are going to be for Kroger. Those are the stories that you can use to kind of create that almost bonding moment with whoever you're interviewing with, because they already have an affinity to Kroger, right? If they're a Kroger person, right? And so, you can turn that into something, and hopefully all of these stories are memorable. That's really the key thing. Because at the end of the day, if you checked off every box, but you weren't memorable, you'll be the third or fourth resume on their mind, and the third or fourth resume doesn't get hired. So you need to think about what are the things that you want to leave as deep memories, so that when they go back, and usually you might be interviewing with 3 or 4 people within one company, if you can get 2 or 3 of the 4 to have a deep opinion of you, hopefully positive, and remember some of those stories, that pushes you to the top of the list. So.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Something that we don't get a chance to talk about much on this, our little LinkedIn Live channel here, but I think that you might have more experience with than most is, so let's say you've done the initial steps right. Your resume had the right buzzwords. It got you through the screening process. You had your first, phone screen. Maybe these days it's a Zoom screen. Who knows? And you've had some interviews, and lo and behold, they make an offer. Woohoo! Tell me about your experience on both sides of negotiating the offer, right? Because they offer you X money and X vacation and what have you, and it's like, oh, but I really want X plus whatever. What's worked for you on either side of that negotiation? Because I'm sure you've been on both sides.
So I would say no matter what, you always want more than they offer, because they always know that you're going to want something else. So don't feel bad about wanting something else, right? But I would say most important is enthusiasm. Chris, I have to say, I am so excited that you're making this offer. I've been really looking forward to this, and it just is so exciting to me that in the next month we're going to be working together. I would love to take this offer and review it in peace, and really think about what you're offering. Can I get back to you in the next week? So I would never immediately respond to an offer. I would always, first of all, lead with extreme enthusiasm. You might have been thinking, gee, I really want to earn $100,000. I just picked that number from out of anywhere. The offer is $80,000. You might turn around and feel like, these bastards, don't they know how valuable I am? I mean, I've looked in the job market. I know that this is a bigger job than $80,000, and they're offering me $80,000. Be quiet. Don't say that. Just, Chris, I have to say, I'm so excited about this offer. You can always tell him you think he's a jerk later, but think about it. Think about it, right? Okay. Enthusiasm. I want to think about this. Let me get back to you. I need a week. Anyone should give you a week. If they don't give you a week, there's a bigger problem at play, right? Don't ask for a month, ask for a week. And then go back and think about it. You probably have a checklist of the things that you want. Where is this offer good and bad? If if it's good on all points, think about what you might want more. Do you want to ask for a starting bonus? Do you want to ask for an extra week's vacation? Do you want to ask for an extra 5 or 10%? It's always okay to add one ask, right? I wouldn't ask for an extra 100%. I would keep it moderate, something again that they can say yes to, right? If you look at your list and there are 5 things that you really want that this offer is not giving you, what I would suggest to you is ask yourself how much you want this job. Don't go to them with 5 things. 5 things that they'll never say yes to 5 things. Think about the 1 or 2 things that are really important to you and say to them, look, love the offer. I was really looking to get an extra 20% because of A, B, and C. And to be honest with you, I've been at 3 weeks of vacation and this offer is at 2. It's kind of hard for me to go back to 2. So those are the 2 things I really would love to see us talk about, right? And just put it to them in that way. Again, be very positive about it. If you cannot back away from those 5 things, go ahead and talk to them about it. My experience is that they will not be able to help you with that, right? So, but I think the number one thing I would say, Chris, is, or number two things I would say is enthusiasm up front and ask for time to think about it before you react.
I like that. I like that a lot. I'm going to circle us back to the getting your resume through the screening process, because you had kind of alluded to something that sounded very interesting, which is how things have changed. Like, what's that world like now, right? So once upon a time, you had some HR folks who were doing the first screening. I heard you use this buzzword I've been hearing a lot. Is it cloud? No. Blockchain.
IA.
AI. That's it. Yeah. I'm really working on a AI blockchain in the cloud startup, but that's a whole separate thing. So okay. So we've said it. AI. Is that a thing now, and how does that change getting your resume through?
There's AI and there's AI. And so what I mean by that is you're really right. AI is a buzzword. And I see certain things in AI that run really correctly and really well. And I see other things that are just mediocre at best. So in one sense of AI, you might have a system that is looking for keywords or major themes. And that type of a search, quite candidly, stinks. That's a technical term we use at IBM, but it stinks. The other is something that actually understands the intent of what's being said and then uses that to create an understanding of the overall kind of idea, or in this case, resume. There are a lot fewer people, and that's going to be more closely associated with another buzzword that's out there right now, which is Gen AI, right? So the bad news is you don't know what they're using. You have to assume worst case scenario that they're just matching keywords or maybe major statements, and they're not matching overall intent. And if that's the case, what you need to do is you need to read everything you can read about the job itself so that you really understand what they're looking for. You need to think about what are the major themes and ideas and KPIs that they are looking to solve against. One thing I didn't mention on the resume, if you have your job and you have bullets under it, it's important under each bullet to also put what the KPIs are that your bullet is affecting, right? So I see people who will put out there, made this change within the organization. Good for you. Lots of change within the organization. What did that do for the organization? Increased sales by X% by making this change in the organization. And so those types of things keyed in together can help get you past as the system is looking to understand what you've actually done, right? So it's about understanding what you've done, creating kind of statements that are in both the cover letter and the resume, because both are getting scanned at this point, and making sure that those are relevant. And I would say it's more of an art than a science. I think people would tell you it's more of a science than an art, but it all really depends on how the systems have been created and trained. And so I don't have a silver bullet on that one, Chris. It's kind of challenging. But the best that I can recommend is take the time to understand what the company might be looking for and what the company might be looking for in a general associate, as well as what the company might be looking for to fill this role. And make sure that those things are being permeated with words that you think might be keywords to them in your resume and cover letter.
Good advice. Good advice. I like it. So we've been chatting almost a half hour. I can't believe it. So probably wrap up fairly soon. what haven't I asked, right? If our goal here is to help people who are looking for the next gig, based on your wealth of experience and knowledge, what haven't I asked you? What have I not given you a chance to share yet?
Oh, I think it's all been good. I think what I would say is I would double down on the networking message, right? And within that, and I'm hoping you don't have hundreds and thousands of people on this call. But with that said, I mean, I'm assuming you all can see my name. I'm assuming you all can probably see my LinkedIn link. Part of networking, right? So reach out to me, link with me. Feel free to ask me questions about what we've discussed. Feel free to point out why everything that I've just said is hogwash. But if you want to be smart in networking, do it in a gentle way, right? But I mean, joking aside, think about your interactions and how you can use them for networking. And don't think of networking as a one-way street. It's a two-way street. And yeah, I think that would be what I would say.
Okay. And we did have a question just pop in the chat from Anu. As a hiring manager, do you actually take the time to read through a cover letter?
Yeah, I do. Well, let me pull that back. It depends. If I look at a cover letter and it's 3 lines, I might not, because at that point it's clear. It's just like, hey, would love to talk to you. But yeah, I'm actually more likely to read the cover letter than I am to read the second page of the resume. The first page of the resume gets to be important. The second and third page often is not. And I'll be honest. I mean, the way that I will look at resume and cover letter is I might have 15 to look at, and I might have 15 minutes to do that, right? And so I will skim them all, and I'll make 2 piles, one where I have interest, one where I don't. And candidly, I might only take 30 seconds to make that determination, right? I mean, depending on how many resumes I have. And then I have a pile of, let's say, 5 that are interesting to me, and I'll dive into those 5 in greater detail. And so your job is to make your resume interesting in a 30-second resume and cover letter in a 30-second to 1-minute time frame. And then I'll take it back and I'll read it in greater detail. Yes, I look at it all. I will look at the cover letter, so long as it's not generic, and I will look at, at very least the first page of the resume. I'll sort, and then from there I'll look in greater detail.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And Anu, thank you for your question. So to those of you who joined us live, thank you. For those of you who are watching it on replay, hey, also thank you. Michael, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful for you being generous with your time.
No worries.
Sharing your thoughts, sharing your experience, and have a fabulous rest of your evening.
Thank you, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.